So this is an unplanned harvest of the fireweed that has been trammeled by somebody coming through the middle of the garden beds. What we're going to do is just cut the stalks on the ground, and I'll take the leaves off and put them in water so we've got them for some natural dye, like some botanical prints. So this is a raised bed full of fibre plants as well as tea plants at Trillium Park. We've got this long tradition as humans of clothing ourselves with plants, so it's really exciting to just broaden what can be a fibre plant and shift our thinking. Trillium is a park that was designed to have artists involved somehow, and I was lucky to be involved in the design process. We have plantings here intentionally chosen for traditional hand technologies, as well as our shipping containers and work bays as enclosed studio space for holding classes and for storing all of the materials and all the tools and everything. So one of the things we're doing is exploring a whole variety of wild fibers, from fireweed to the dogbane or Indian hemp to milkweed, stinging nettle. We've grown flax, which is a early agricultural crop for textiles. This is the nettle plant. The research that I've done with community here has been around how the green stalks were processed by the Coast Salish ancestors for fish nets, and also processed in different ways for clothing. So one of the things I love about it is that it's this plant that's a culture connector and connects my ancestors to the ancestors of the place I live. Nicola and I just harvested the nettle that is going to be used for a project I'm working on, 2 different tops or shirts that explore different ways of working with the nettle fiber. One way is when the fiber is what's called retted, which is a controlled rot. So these are just green nettle stalks that the leaves and the seeds were stripped off of. This is going to ret the nettle for probably the next 4 days. The other process is harvesting what I call green nettle, and you're stripping the fiber off of the stalks while they are still fresh. I like to walk the branches to crack the nodes. Once they're stomped, I can just crack them open and slide the fiber off the outside. This is the green fiber that has not been retted. You can hear it, it's super crunchy. You can also just kind of feel the texture of it. It's very different from the nettle fiber that has been retted and then stripped off of the stalks. This is dogbane. It's also sometimes called Indian hemp, and the fiber comes from a fluff in the seed pod, as well as a beautiful long red fiber that comes from the stalk. This is common milkweed, Asclepias. We'll get big seed pods with lovely silky fiber inside and beautiful silky fiber in the stalk. What I've learned so far is the milkweed actually just comes off better when it is fresh and end of season after a cold snap. We're taking the milkweed and taking the fiber off the same way as we've done for the dogbane and the nettle. Some of these are starting to pop now. So what I can do is just run my finger down that as soon as I get it open to slide all of those out like that. So I've got this little bit of milkweed tow in here, and I'm gonna put some of that fluff from the seed of the dogbane in there. Now I'm gonna just roll that up. Oh, that's pretty good. I'm applying two different nettle drop spindles together, and one of them is a much tighter twist. That's my line nettle, and the other is much softer. And I'm adding water because that helps just get some of the woolly ends tamed down in place. Technically, I started this shirt in terms of processing some of these fibers probably about a year ago. I've wanted to have a nettle shirt since 2002 when I first started kind of experimenting and learning about nettle. And I was always saying nettle shirt 2020 as a joke, and here it is 2020. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what this might look like and then what my next step is going to be. I think what I'll end up doing is casting on the side here, just below that stripe actually becomes a nice point. Good. So I'm just getting all of these fibers lined up and organized by rolling them on my thigh. It's kind of the biggest challenge. If you can do a 3-strand braid, as long as you can coordinate your fingers on holding all of the pieces, you can up that 3-strand to as many as you want. And of course, nettle is my favorite fiber. It tells such a story about relationship to place and is one of those fibers that grows all over the northern hemisphere. For me, being settler descent living on Coast Salish land, it has been really a key part for me of how I've connected to this place, as well as giving me kind of a common bond and connection with local nations, skill holders, and knowledge holders that I've been able to work with. There's lots of similarities, but there's also lots of differences in how the nettle has been processed, depending on what kind of the end results were that you were wanting, whether you were making a fishing net versus making a sweater. And so this braiding and processing method I'm doing is kind of a hybrid of the different methods I've learned. I'm getting the crochet hook to just pull through some new fiber. So that's how the sides have come in and then joined to weave in to this back braid. And I'm just kind of filling in these back components now and the arm. I think it was last August that I started very specifically processing the nettle. And so I've had a year of processing and knitting at all kinds of different places. Halfway through the project, the pandemic hit. The community-based programming has obviously looked really different through the pandemic, figuring out how to do things in really small groups. We've done a few online sessions of having some online weaving time. So what you can do is clip off any of the branches with leaves that are kind of splaying out.
Okay.
Yep, perfect, right where they're hitting the main branch. When we think about where our clothing comes from, it's usually coming from a long way away. The footprint is huge for a garment by the time you're purchasing it and putting it on your back. This is primarily from a spot 15 feet from where I'm sitting now. In the wintertime, because of the COVID lockdown, we couldn't meet, and that was when David Goman, my husband, was kind enough to build me a warp-weighted loom, which is a style of loom my ancestors would have been using in Scotland, and I began weaving the fabric that became the sleeves. So I'm stitching in the sleeves. And the vest has been scoured and then pounded, so it's much softer, believe it or not, but it's also got this mobility and this movement to it now that it didn't have so much before. What I find really fascinating is how this notion of zero waste design, where I'm using every piece of the cloth, and when I look at this now and I look at how these arms that were just one piece cut in half, and when I look at how those very naturally shape and become sleeves, it's almost like uncovering the origin story of where this piece of design comes from. So this is late spring of 2021. I started the nettle coat well over a year ago, and I've just finally got enough threads processed and spun again to start warping up what's going to be the third and final piece. So this piece of cloth that I'm making is going to be about 3 meters long, about 13 inches wide, and that's going to become the hood and the front panel on the coat. This is the 4th time I've warped this loom now, and every time I'm learning so much about the process of weaving and of working with hand-spun threads for cloth towards garment construction. And I'm still making stupid novice mistakes, but I hopefully learn from them and don't repeat them. And it just feels like the best way possible to be learning is just each step, each piece. There's new things that come into clarity of why they're done a particular way. So when I've got the coat on, it is very crispy in the areas around the sleeve and armpit for wearing. And I thought I would just see what it was like if I could do some beetling of this cloth in around the arms and see if that will soften it up a little bit. So this is the final component of the coat before I get to the stitching and design work. The nettle cloth is so springy and bouncy compared to linen. It's been really fascinating to see how different the cloth properties are. So today is the day for the buttons. This was pair number 3 that I made, and they're made with the waist warp. So this is about 5 stalks of dogbane that I drop spindled, and I'm just waxing now to use for my buttonholes. Fast fashion is this notion that we all deserve the privilege to buy new things and wear new things, to just pop into a shop and pick up something new every week. And every week there's new fashions coming out. And there's no concept that garments can last. There's no connection to the resources that have been used and the human labor that has gone into the production of those garments. Right from the beginning, I was intrigued with the notion of how I could make a garment with nettle with as few skills and tools as possible. And in answering that, it actually has led me to push my own skill development to the point of working on a loom and spinning my nettle fibers on my wheel and pushing my thread production and craftsmanship to the next level. I'm wetting the coat because I want it to take the form of my body in its final dried shape. I'm also aware as I move that I can really just shape it and shift the braid and open up the seams a little bit and get the form where it's going to be finally resting. Clothing myself now feels like both a really simple, small thing that I can be doing in a world that is in crisis. It also feels unbelievably radical. We should be able to clothe ourselves. We should be able to feed ourselves and make our own shelter. There's been so many community members that are connected to this, so many individuals that have taught me or learned alongside me, and I know them. I have that relationship to the people, I have that relationship to the places, to the land, and knowledge of working with the plants. And these are really and truly both collaborations with nettle.